Welcome to the ultimate all-in mage build. Our vision is the classic robed wizard with the spell to solve every problem. We'll be boosting our magicka pool as much as possible, creating powerful and perhaps expensive custom spells that can make use of all that magicka, supported by alchemy to fuel our mana regen. This build is viable for and tested on expert difficulty. The Moon Mage strides forward with the power of the heavens at his fingertips, robes glowing with protective magics, strapped with potions to fuel the hungry but devastating power of his spells. A wave of the hand and a ball of pure energy explodes in their midst, their strength sapped, rendering them helpless as the frostburn of moonlight engulfs them. Since our highest priority is boosting our magicka, High Elf is the best choice here for an additional 100 magicka. We aren't too fussed about the weakness to fire, frost and shock since we can shore up our defences with magic, and gain additional protection from our birth sign. Breton would be our second choice for a bonus 50 magicka, and also a sweet 50% magic resist. Our birth sign is Atronach. The extra 150 magicka is significant, though yes, it does make the beginning of your run a bit inconvenient not having passive regen. Welkin stones and alien wells can sustain you though, at least until you boost your alchemy, which thankfully is super easy to do. You can harvest the large farms outside towns like Skingrad, and create lots of restore fatigue potions for quick leveling. Once you've done that, stockpiling restore magicka potions makes this a non-issue, and actually forces you into the most optimal playstyle. If you've watched my magicka guide, you'll know that natural magicka regen is already reduced during combat, and pauses after every spell you cast, meaning you really want to be using mana potions during combat anyway. The 50% spell absorption is also very nice. It offsets some of our weakness to elemental damage from being a high elf, since we have a 50-50 chance of ignoring the spell entirely. Remember, that's different to magic resist, which reduces all magic effects by a percentage. This just increases our chance of blanking the spell, but we still have a chance of taking all of it. Starting off at 50 allows us the option to boost all the way to 100 using items or spells if we want to totally nullify enemy mages, though this can feel overpowered. Leaving it at the 50 base absorption already increases your survivability a good amount. For our specialization, no surprise, we're picking magic for a +5 boost to all the spellcasting skills. For our major skills, let's go with athletics to better kite enemies or reposition. Alteration, destruction, illusion and restoration as our go-to schools of magic, they are too valuable to pass on. All our protection, damage, crowd control and buffs come from these skills respectively. As a bonus magic skill, we're picking mysticism here. It doesn't need to be boosted high, but the utility spells like light or soul trap are ones you'll inevitably use. Swap this with conjuration if you prefer summoning minions or want to occasionally mix in melee combat to your playstyle by summoning bound armor and weapons. Finally, alchemy. Some might see this as a waste since it's easy to boost with the farm method I mentioned, but any help we can get to reduce the tedium of leveling will take the sting out of the Atronach birth sign early game, which is its main downside. And the quicker we get to creating strong restore magic potions from only one ingredient, the quicker our build comes online. One optional change, if you really wanted to wear light armor for the look or flavor, swap out illusion for light armor, since at high levels your spell effectiveness will be capped at 95% and stop all the illusion spells except paralyze from working on enemies. Slotting block into your build, perhaps instead of athletics, is another option since at high levels of block, even blocking with your staff will reduce 50% of the damage, which is then reduced further by your armor rating. Our attribute priority is intelligence and endurance. When leveling up, these should be the first you max out. Intelligence, because of course boosting our total magicka enables our ridiculous spells, and endurance because max health is very important in keeping us alive to dish out the damage. The third stat on level up should be speed. Getting away from melee enemies or dodging ranged enemies is made so much simpler if we can strafe quickly. I recommend a 5-5-2 split. A 4-4-4 split could work if you favour speed, but would slightly slow maxing out your most important attributes. Thankfully, because of our Atronach birth sign, we have no need for willpower, making this a pleasantly hyper-focused build. We're sticking with clothing rather than armor to maintain 100% spell effectiveness. We don't want to be leaving damage or duration on the table by having less than 100%. That's simply wasted mana since you'd be paying for a spell but not receiving the whole effect you paid for, especially with Oblivion's brutal rounding down of decimals. A shield spell will do just as well as armor. We only need to keep it on our hotbar and cast it before a fight. Even then, it's only really needed for fights with multiple enemies. If there's only one or two, you'll paralyze them and finish the fight before it even begins. In terms of enchantments for our clothing, undoubtedly the most valuable are Fortify Magicka, 25 from a Grand Soul Gem, or an impressive 50 from a Maximum Sigil Stone. Other than boosting magicka, having shield or elemental shield enchants could be good, essentially turning our clothes into weightless armor. 10 shield from each Grand Soul Gem, or 20 from a max Sigil Stone, though you'll actually want elemental shields from Sigil Stones as they max out at 25. If you're happy to keep casting shield spells though, it works out better to boost your magicka, which can then be turned into shield protection, and then regenerated and spent on offensive spells. Remember to keep your wrist irons from the start of the game. They're the only enchantable hand slot item that counts as clothing. A few DLC areas have some spares if you need: Sundercliff Watch, Deepscorn Hollow, and Dunroot Barrow on the Shivering Isles. Because robes count as a combined piece for legs and chest, you do have one less enchantment slot than if you wear regular clothing, but I think it's worth it for the aesthetic. As for our weapon, we are of course using a staff. The Mage's Staff you get from the Mage Guild questline, especially if you pick the Paralysis version, is essentially our best in slot. We're using our spells for damage, so this is a great bit of crowd control not tied to our mana pool, so even if we're out of mana, we can paralyze with our staff to buy some time. Paralyze is an expensive effect to cast, so having it by another means is great. Apotheosis would be the only other staff worth considering. Decent damage, available early if you've got the gold, but annoying to recharge frequently. The staffs we loot early game will be best to supplement our damage or sometimes exceed our current spells for damage. Our suite of spells forms the bread and butter of our build. When leveling, we'll absolutely be buying up all the ones we like the look of from vendors, particularly those throughout the Mages Guild, whether it's a Fireball, Paralyze, Calm, Fire Shield, Invisibility. We want it all, so we always have the best tool for the job. When one of your schools of magic reaches 25, 50, 75 or 100, that's when you'll want to pop back around to the vendors to buy up the next tier of spells. Checking the wiki to see which guild or vendor has the right tier of spells can save you a lot of time. Remember that the damaging touch spells at each tier cost less mana and does more damage than the versions on target. Beyond vendor bought spells though, the real fun begins when we craft our own custom spells. There are plenty of fun and powerful options out there. I even have whole videos exploring spell ideas, but here are a few staples that I find useful, reflavoured to suit our Moon Mage. Remember, flavour is free. Moonlight. Cool moonlight shines down in an area making our targets vulnerable. Of course this was coming. Weakness to magic and weakness to frost, since that's the element we'll focus on. This amplifies damage so much that it'll have you reaching for the difficulty slider. This likely isn't needed on adept difficulty, but on expert it turns the grind into a fun but surmountable challenge. Of course it's not just for damage, this amplifies all the effects, whether we're hitting their fatigue, draining stats or speed. It's a lot of fun to turn all your spell effects up to max. Remember that if an effect doesn't have a magnitude, like Paralyze, it'll instead boost the duration. Comet. A comet of ice speeds towards the target, stunning them on impact. Vendor bought spells cap out at 110 instant damage. We can nearly double that with a custom spell by adding another second onto it. We can also replicate an enemy being staggered on impact by adding burden and drain strength, halting their movement for a moment and helping us backpedal or land a second shot. This spell is our equivalent of swinging a sword. You'll always want a ranged single target damage spell equipped. Just be mindful that you'll need the magicka pool to support casting it a few times. If setting up with a weakness spell first, you can get away with making a cheaper and weaker version of this. Gravity Surge. We amplify the moon's gravity to suddenly pull our enemies from their feet. One of my favourites, this makes dealing with a big group of enemies far more manageable. We drain their max fatigue for the duration and continuously damage their fatigue so they keep collapsing to the ground. This could be an area paralyzed, but because some enemy types are immune to paralysis, this is the fun and more effective alternative. Tidal Lock. We lock our foes in place and channel damaging energy into them. This is a potent, spammable attack on touch, and for those susceptible to paralyze, it's game over. We paralyze them for a second, deal a chunk of damage, and then apply weakness to magic for a few seconds, enough time for our second and third attacks to ramp up in damage, refreshing the paralyze timer and stunlocking them until you've burned away all their health. Lunar Mantle. A beam of lunar light envelops us with protective power. Since we're only wearing clothes, our armor rating is usually a big fat 0. When a fight breaks out, we want this on our hotbar, instantly bringing us up to the armor cap of 85% damage reduction. Because magic effects, shield included, get exponentially more expensive as you raise the magnitude, it's slightly cheaper to cast if you round it off with the elemental shields. With our Atronach Birth Sign giving us 50% chance to absorb spells, in tandem with this armor spell, we're surprisingly tanky for a mage. Blood Moon. A blood moon compels our foes to fight each other. With command creature and command humanoid at max magnitude in a 15-foot area for 10 seconds, any enemy in the area will become our ally and start attacking the others. This is useful for controlling a crowd, redirecting the number of attacks aimed at us, and allowing us to take them out one at a time. Remember that repeated attacks against a commanded creature will break the effect. But if everyone else is still under our control, it's worth it to be able to focus them down one at a time. Eclipse. The light we reflect is blocked and we're suddenly eclipsed from view. This is a great tool for dropping aggro, repositioning, or general mobility getting around the landscape. With invisibility for 10 seconds, we can immediately get ourselves out of the line of fire. Fortify speed and athletics then boosts our speed to help us either escape or maneuver into an advantageous position to resume the fight. Blessing of Silver. The silver light of the moon gifts us with a silver tongue. We'll be boosting our personality trait and mercantile skill by 100, as well as casting charm on our target, usually the shopkeeper the other side of the counter. The reason we aren't boosting Speechcraft as well is because it only affects the minigame, and we can bypass all of that with the charm portion of the spell, which brings their attitude up to the cap of 100 already. We only need to have these effects last for a few seconds, because once we initiate conversation, time stops in the game world, so the whole time we're browsing their wares, buying and selling, we'll be benefiting from the better prices of our mercantile skill and their high opinion of us. Don't forget to adjust the haggle slider for better prices. With our maxed out stats and a charmed cashier, they should have no problem giving us their best prices, with the slider all the way to the right. The fun of this build is the sheer number of options we have to approach each encounter. If we know a tricky fight is coming, we can apply our shield spell or boost our intelligence and health. If we're exploring a cave, we'll want to use a light spell or night eye. We can even throw in detect life. If we're going through a long underwater passage, pop a water breathing spell. Feather spells for carrying out loot. Healing to get ourselves out of the danger zone, invisibility to sneak, you get the idea. For combat, we'll usually open up with a big crowd control spell, paralyze or collapse them. Then throw in some damaging area of effect spells if they're clumped together, or pick them off one by one with damaging bolts. Our spells are powerful but expensive. 2 or 3 spells in and we'll be running on empty. And as Natronach, it's not like we can wait for our mana to regen. Spam your hotkey for magic potions a few times and get back to casting. Our quick slots could look something like this. Our main single target attack, Comet, in slot 1, then an AoE damage option, then Tidal Lock, our touch option to paralyze those right in front of our face. Slot 4 is Moonlight, our big debuff to open up tough fights. Then our Magicka potions. Make sure this button is easily accessible, you'll need to mash this multiple times every fight. Slot 6 is Gravity Surge, our big crowd control option. Then Eclipse for our panic button escape. Finally Lunar Mantle, which we'll cast to boost our armor before each fight. Positioning is important, which is why we put points into speed. We'll generally want to keep our distance, though some spells are best on touch, so we might need to run in close briefly before backing away from sword swings, dodging projectiles, or running circles around our enemies to group them up for a juicy AoE spell. Our power is only limited by our creativity, something exemplified by the story we can build for our Moon Mage. Born on the island of Oregon, Sirius often looked across the sea to the horizon and let his mind wander. He would stargaze, stare for hours in the chill nights, seeming to draw warmth and inspiration from the moon. During his schooling, he would often get in trouble for not paying attention, busy daydreaming, but when his tutors tried to catch him out with questions, he always had the answer. Like many high elves, magic flowed easily from his fingertips. Sirius found this freeing, at first because it made the boring work easier, but then because he found he was better than the others at it. He found solutions no one else had thought of. He enjoyed success, so applied himself fully, snowballing into more success and more power, being even better than the rest. His tutors joked that he'd be in charge one day, but none were keen to help him on his way up. In his efforts to beat others, he had estranged himself from his peers. His loneliness gave him more time with his thoughts, and this is where he spent his time problem solving, in the creative soup of his imagination. Sirius eventually found escape from their resentment by leaving the shores of Oregon and finding his horizon in the illustrious capital of Cyrodiil. It's no coincidence that here was the seat of the mage's power in the Imperial Empire. The university called to him. He knew they had the means to push his abilities even further. He took to study hungrily, supporting the mage guilds across Cyrodiil to earn his place. And when the books and tutors had little left to teach, he sought practical education, flexing his superiority in the desperate combat of the city's arena. He felt untouchable. Seeking grander goals, he followed rumors of divine intervention through the Knights of the Nine. He sought pilgrimage to become purer, closer to the celestial heavens than ever. This quest led him to parley with Daedric gods, executing their will whenever it would profit his needs, while also revealing to him the darker sides of power. Shortly after this exposure to Daedric conspiracies, word spread of the fall of Kvatch and the Daedric hells unleashed. As Archmage, head of the university, proven pilgrim of the divine, and blessed by the moon itself, Sirius knew it was his duty to march headlong into Oblivion. Thanks for watching, smash subscribe, see you on the next one.